Hello. Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you, Sonia?
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Wonderful. Man, I need some whatever you're taking me. I need some of that.
Ooh, you just don't know. I just feel wonderful today.
I do too. I do too. I every time we talk, Sonia, I think about one of my former students not too far from you over in Oxford,
Uh-huh.
Angela Clayton. Angela retired. She worked there at what's that, Virginia Lina, that little community there up 51.
Okay.
Out of Oxford, north of going toward the Virginia border.
Yeah.
And I talked with Angela recently. She finished the Mels program, and then she went to the organizational leadership program and got her doctorate with me there.
Oh, good for her.
And yeah, she retired from the school business, and she's doing a good bit of charity work and private consulting work. But I don't know, Angela always just happy and upbeat and bright, and always just made the day better. Always made the day better, much like you do.
There's no reason to be down. There's no reason at all.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah, I went up and I was in that part of the world, and it was back in, I think it was 2015, maybe. And it was during the election cycle for 2016. I was up somewhere north of Oxford, up through there, and I went past his house, and I thought it was a junkyard, but it was a man's house.
Wow.
And it looked like that either that or he was having a yard sale, a flea market, but everything he owned was out in the yard, and old couches, and it was just an awful looking place. And he had taken a sheet of plywood and cut it in half and made him two signs to stick up out in his front yard. And this place was out in the middle of nowhere, and it was awful. And he had two signs that he'd taken a can of spray paint, and he painted him two signs. One of them said, "Vote for Trump," and the other one said, "Goats for sale." Well, that's pretty appropriate for that part of the world. I thought, now that might have been the most enlightened place that I went through during that election cycle. Yeah. So, but I think of Angela. I talked to Angela last month. I really appreciate her, but I appreciate you too, son. All right, is it time to get started? Welcome back, everybody. We're going to talk about budget and finance tonight. We're going to talk about budget laws and those kinds of things. And I know you've been out talking with your administrator about those kinds of things. We've kind of talked a lot this semester about your money and your honey. Can't find either one of them at your working place, not in the school business. Those are the two things that'll get you going the fastest in terms of your personal behavior. Is if you spend money incorrectly or improperly or illegally, whether you know it or not, it's immaterial. You know, one of the things that I finished up with my doctoral group, we had class this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And one of the things that I had to talk with them about is intent. We can't know what's in a person's heart or what their intent was. We can only know what the outcome or the incident was. And one of the things that neophyte or emerging school administrators have this notion of is that everybody knows me. I'm a good person. They hired me to get this job. They'll trust and believe in me. You just don't get that. We just can't, we can't extend that to you. I know we all need grace. Well, I'm telling you, I do badly. You know, but we just can't do that with public money. We just we have to verify everything, and it's not anything personal. That's the point here is I can't know what's in people's hearts. I know people are good people, but it's not about what your intent was. It's what your actions were. It's what outcomes, and that's one of those things that you know, it's nothing personal, and it really isn't. It isn't anything personal. But your district, two things your district will never support you on, and never go to bat for you, and never support you on. They'll never support you over on money. Something happens to the money gets hoodooed. Sorry. They will not say, they will not forgive and forget. They will do neither. That's number one. And number two, personal interrelation misconduct of a sexual nature, just won't forgive that either. You got to know that. You get no leeway here, folks. You get none. I don't know if any of you live close enough to the Charlotte region to get the Charlotte news, but the big hullabaloo right now in Charlotte is the athletic booster club at South Mecklenburg High School. You know, one of our activities this semester is to interview a local administrator about fundraising and what are the laws and policies in your district on fundraising. And what I always respond back to you is you got to know. You can delegate the activity of fundraising and the accounting thereof to a outside or to a parent group or a booster club or whatever, but that does not absolve you of the responsibility. You have to audit the money. It has to be directed in your budget. You have to write receipts. It has to be accounted for. There's at this point at South Mecklenburg now full disclosure, South Mecklenburg High School has about 3,500 students. South Mecklenburg High School is much more affluent than it was even 10 years ago. And so when we say that this family got control and was both the signatories on the checks for the booster club, when I say they absconded with the money, I'm not talking about front pocket money. I'm talking about they've already traced more than $300,000, and it's probably going to be in excess of $500,000 that they've absconded with. I'm talking. This is 20-year in prison type money. This is going to be in excess of $500,000. This has been going on for a number of years. Their annual budget's $250,000. So I think Dr. Singh's struggling to stay on tonight. Me too. So now I've told you the story. I inherited a junior high in Charlotte where one of the coach / athletic director drove the activity bus, the school's activity bus, as his personal vehicle around town and on weekends. I can't make that up. And it was an old long activity bus. I ain't talking about a little band or something or another like all the volleyball team around in. He had a full-size school bus that he drove as his personal vehicle. He drove it back and forth to school every day. He drove it on the weekend to the barbershop and downtown. And I mean, I can't make this up. He just was using it as his personal vehicle, and was writing checks and decided to change the color scheme of the school from Eastway forever had been the Trojans. And, you know, Trojans' traditional colors are red, blue, and silver. And so they decided that they were going to become a middle school, even though they were still junior high when I got there, when I left. But they decided that they were in preparation to at some point be a junior high. They were going to be the Jaguars instead of the Trojans. And now understanding that Eastway in the history of Charlotte was the first really big time junior high in Charlotte, because it was the feeder school just down the street from the first big time high school in Charlotte, which was Garinger. I know Garinger fallen upon hard times, but Garinger was in National Geographic in 1959 as one of the most creative and innovative high schools in America. Has had a campus like a college, the whole deal. And it was the home, it had been recently renamed Garinger. It was originally Charlotte High School. It was the high school in Charlotte. And Eastway was the junior high school. Dwight Clark, that played for the 49ers, that made the catch in the Super Bowl for the 49ers, he was all the records were, he had half of the athletic records at Eastway Junior High and Garinger. And so the notion here was this was a long-standing thing in this community. And we had these nitwits that came along and said, we're going to be the Jaguars now. Well, that's all well and good, except you got to buy all new uniforms. Well, they went out and ordered new uniforms from Bocock Stroud, green and purple and silver and all these different colors with Jaguars on them, except they didn't have any money. And ran up, a $125,000 bill for new uniforms. I inherited that and had to fix that problem. And Willie's point that probably the principal and the AD at South Mecklenburg, they're already gone, Willie. That is correct. They've already been gone. That is correct. And so Nate, what question have you got?
How do you go about fixing a $150,000 debt when you step in? Like, what's your first step when you're walking into a situation?
What have we got that we can return?
Okay.
I'm serious. That's the first thing I said is, what have we got that we hadn't used that we can give back? But now, branded stuff, you can do that. So the first thing I did was, if we had anything, and so I got about $20,000 worth of credit at Bocock Stroud. We had extra stuff that we didn't need, that never been out of the box. I canceled some orders and did that stuff. So I got down to about a little over $100,000. And so then what I did was I got a special dispensation from the county to do a couple extra fundraisers. And I raised $60,000 immediately. Now, did I violate federal lunch standards? Probably, because I was selling candy. I got Tim Melton, who had a private fundraising company, and I said, you're going to be my best friend forever. And we started different fundraising, but the big ones, most of them were just a cover for what we were really doing. We were running a wholesale house on candy, bar candy. I sold $60,000 worth in 1 year. Profit. I don't mean worth. I sold $60,000. We sold $60,000 worth in 1 year profit. And that got us enough. And so I paid it off in 2 years selling candy, which is not the right thing to do, but then people want their money. That's how that worked. And so, but the principal in front of me, they fired too over that. But yeah, that's what we're talking about, doing dumb things like that. See, I never figured out how in the world they thought that the district would bail them out on that and send them the money. I guess they felt like that if we can't pay it, somebody else will pay it. Well, that's not the way finance works. You've got to have the money in hand to do something. Now, do you remember back to when you started this program? The first of your evidences was the app sale. The second was the AppTel. The third has been the OMA. The fourth is the skip. And one of the things that we do every semester is we have you put an action plan together, right? Where at least one of them every semester you got it. And what are the two things that you have to identify every time you're going to do an action plan? Your fiscal resources and your human resources. We have you do that every time. You want to know why? Because the rules now, because of all these abuses over the years, the rules now in your school for your school improvement plan, which is our process mirrors, putting together all of our evidence, is you can't put anything on your school improvement plan that you don't already have money for in your banking, and it is an approved expenditure. You cannot write things on your school improvement plan that are, if we had the money, we're going to do this. You're not allowed to do that anymore. So that was one of the things that's really helped with that kind of stuff. The second is that you will do purchase orders only. And that you are not able to call up Bocock Stroud, or that was a famous sporting goods supplier in Charlotte, that you're not allowed to call them up under any circumstances and order anything. And Bocock Stroud was told that if you take these orders, we will not pay you. If you take an order over the phone without a written purchase order, we will not. And Bocock Stroud, because of that, went out of business. They went out of business. I'm not making that up. Part of the reason why everybody used them was just because you could call them up, they'd bring it over later that day. And when they had to go through the state bid process and the purchase order, they couldn't compete price-wise. But the way they competed is you could call them up and say, I need a basketball this afternoon for the game. And it'd be over in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, it'd show up. Now, if it costs on contract system, if it costs, say, $80 for a leather basketball, they'd charge you $120. They charge you anywhere from 30 to 50% more than the market rate. But that's how they stayed in business. They'd sell you stuff on a phone call and a handshake. And they would remind you, it's not illegal for them to do that. It's illegal for you, the one to contract them to do that. But there's no legality on their part. Let me make one more point and I'm gonna get to Jennifer. If you'll remember the case, and now full disclosure, one of my best friends that lives right there is an FBI, just retired as FAC in Charlotte, is FBI agent. He's the one, if you go and look up Patrick Cannon, when he was charged and convicted of fraud and bribery and racketeering when he was mayor of Charlotte just a few years ago. I'm not talking about 100 years. I mean, maybe what, 6 or 7 years ago. If you look at the indictment, Eric Davis's name is on each page. That's my friend Eric, one of my better friends. And the whole deal with that is Slim Balcom, who owns all of the MAL Entertainment, owns all the strip clubs, the good ones in Charlotte. They had they subpoenaed Slim and he went to court. And Slim reminded them, it's not against the law for me to offer bribes to the mayor. It's just against the law for him to take them. And Slim got off. Now, Patrick Cannon spent, what, 4 or 5 years in the federal pen? But now Slim walked away scot-free. The thing to remember in that is this: if you are the public employee, you're the one who faces the legal exposure, not the company that sends you stuff that shouldn't, not the guy that gives you bribes. You have the one that has the fiduciary responsibility. That's the part you got to remember. You can't say, well, but they sent it to me. It doesn't matter. It's not against the law for Bocock Stroud to send you stuff on the phone. It's against the law for you to do that because it doesn't follow the legal purchasing method in the state of North Carolina, and you can be put in jail for that. It's not against the law for Slim Balcom to send his girls over to the mayor's condo or to take or to give bribes. It's not against the law for him to do that. It's against the law for the mayor to ask for it and then take it. The public employee, the public person that works for the state or is the public, they're the one who bear the legal burden. You've got to always remember that there will be other people that will get you into these kinds of things, but remember, they don't have the legal exposure that you do. And so that's why you hear me say all the time, nobody can give you permission to break the law. You are the one who lacks indemnification when something bad goes on. All right, Jennifer, you had a question.
So about the school improvement plan stuff with the money. So I'm just thinking about like our school improvement plan. There were a couple things that were on it that had not been like purchased yet.
Right.
So because the budget had not been approved yet. So how does that work? Don't you have to have your improvement plan in at a certain time?
Yes, you do. And I'm gonna let Dr. Singh, because he's worked with this. Now, I worked in 2 different places that did that 2 different ways. In Charlotte, we had enough money in Charlotte that we'd go ahead and let that stand and wait for the budget to be approved, because we had buku money in terms of on hand for operating. Now that you're supposed to have 3 months worth, we had years worth in Charlotte. But now that budgets have gotten much tighter, and a lot of districts don't have but about 1.5 months of operating on hand, when I worked, I'll say this, when I worked, you never hear me talk about this when I worked in Rutherford as well. When I worked in Rutherford, we didn't have a pot to pee in or a window to throw it out of. I mean, we'd have had to have somebody give us money to got up to poor. We were way below poor there. I'm telling you, all the mills closed. When I mean all the mills closed, 85% of the people in the county who had a job lost it within 2 years. Let me say that again. 85% of the people in the county who had a job lost it within 2 years. Furniture plant, Roy Hill closed down. All the textile, everything closed down. I mean, the county went ka-flunk. Bankruptcies. I mean, the county went under. I mean, you just can't believe how bad it was. Now, in a situation like that, you couldn't put anything down if you didn't already have the money, because money wasn't coming. Dr. Sane, if you want to address how that's done in kind of an average county like Lincoln.
Yeah. First of all, can y'all hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's funny, it's changed with ESSERs. We used to be very specific that you could not, if the money had not dropped, you could not put it in your school improvement plan because we did not have a savings. But now if we had a percent, like if it was a smaller purchase that we knew we could cover, we would allow it in a school improvement plan. But if it was like a big, like for example, if you were going to do a $1 million contract with Ready or something like that, then we would say no. Now that we have an ESSER savings account, we've been a little bit more lenient on that for the past 3 years. But once that ESSER money runs back, it will go back to the, if you don't have the money, it doesn't matter if the budget hasn't dropped. You just don't put it in. You can put like the same supports, like the academic supports that you would want to accomplish from it, but you just could not identify the program or the resource specific.
Thank you so much. And
Thank
so,
you.
absolutely. So things have been a little bit wonky in the last 2 to 3 years because of COVID, and the extra money floating around and what schools could do with it. And so, yes, things have relaxed a little bit. And I'll say that because most of you know that I'm doing a special deal with Gaston County Schools with 14 students who are in the same program as y'all. They're one semester ahead of you. And their county's paying for it with COVID money. And so those folks are getting a free ride. They ain't paying for their books. They're using COVID money to do that. So that COVID money is kind of crazy in that it's really kind of wild west. You can spend on anything you want to. And it covers up a lot of sins. But when it goes, it'll be back to pinching pennies again, and nothing until the money drops. You can't be in your plan. And so, and I'm glad that we're exploring that. So here's the thing: when you do an action plan, you should always keep your eye toward the money and personnel. I know that when you run your numbers and you say, we've got to have this, we need this, we should have this will benefit our kids. But folks, you got to keep your eye on the dollars, not just the coming and going and the accounting of them, but you also have to keep an eye on, what if this became public knowledge? I've told you the story of the Gang of Five in Charlotte who ran in the 90s, who ran as a group to get on the county commissioners because the district was spending $6 million on the high school challenge for 3 high schools. Now, full disclosure, that $6 million, they made it sound like it was all the money in the world. And it was less than 1/10 of 1% of the budget. The budget at that time, Charlotte-Mecklenburg, was $1.4 billion, $1.4 billion with a B. And they were spending $6 million because it was a court order to do it, and they acted like it was all the money in the world. So we have to look at the optics of things. So what should have been done at that time, we should have put that in perspective, that that this is what we're doing. We're spending this much money, $2 million per high school, on this many kids because Judge Manning says what we're doing is genocide. And so we're trying to fix this problem that we've got at these 3 high schools. It boils down to pennies, for per student, as many students as we're talking about here. It's not, and it's, less than 10% of 1 percentage point of our budget, but we didn't put it in perspective. And we had people that ran on that and got in, and as soon as they stopped that money, that was all they were they were just jugheads anyway. But they were just bigots. That, you know, that it wasn't really about the money to them. It was about who the money was being spent on. If it'd been $6, they'd have been mad as hell, that much. And so, but these are lessons that you kind of need to understand, that you can't look bad on the money. Not only can you got to be clean on the handling of it, but you got to look good as well in terms of, you know, you can't be, even if you get the money, sometimes just because you can doesn't mean you should. I mean, be careful about spending large amounts on controversial projects. Be careful about how you raise money. I mean, full disclosure, I did the wrong thing selling candy, but I didn't have much choice. And the district knew it and looked the other way till I could get that debt paid off. Now, they fired the principal that made that decision. But I mean, it didn't change the money. It did not change the money. And so you say, well, why did the district just allot that money? They couldn't, because that money was spent illegally. They could not be complicit in a crime. And so what they did was, Dale, if you fix this, and they did this, when don't tell us how you're going to fix it. We don't want to know. And I'll just tell you, Tim Melton, we put a candy room in, and we sold candy every week of the school year. Every week we sold candy. One of the groups sold candy every week. And I'm sure not coincidentally, when I went to the senior high, a couple, 3 years later, when I went there and inherited a much bigger debt than that, I brought Tim right over and we put a candy room in the high school and just kept right on going. No, was that the right thing to do? Absolutely not. But, you know, what you got to get an understanding is even if you're not the person who spends the money incorrectly, you may be required to figure out a way to make it up. And I think that was Nate's question and that's right, Nate. The district can't pay illegal bills. And so they'll have you figure out a way, or they'll facilitate you a way to work that debt off. You know, I had a debt over at the high school, and one of them was to Pepsi Cola, because the fellow that had been dealing with the machines there that worked at the school had been stealing the money and not paying Pepsi Cola for the Pepsis. And I had to figure out a way, but the sad part is in order not to create a public stink, a furor like they have at South, like the money at South Neck, they let him retire. Well, what am I going to do? I owe Pepsi $20,000. And so I had Pepsi, you know, I stopped taking any of the commission on the drinks and let Pepsi put in a couple more machines. And for a year, I went without any commissions and let Pepsi make their money back. I mean, these are the kind of deals you get into. This is real life, unfortunately. But the trick is, don't do this to yourself. You may have to get involved in it, because a lot of times that's why you may get a job, is bad things have been happening and you got to clean it up. But you know, the trick is don't get yourself in these things. And if you find yourself in them, you can't be breaking the law to get yourself out of them. You got to figure out a way to, but you need to understand what all the budgeting and all the financial laws are. So Nate, did you have another question before we start our actual formal piece?
It really actually, in my situation at a charter school, it really actually had a negative impact on how we function now and how we sustain our budget. Because when I first got hired, we had a principal named Mr. Wade, and he was from a private school, and he was spending the money like it was private. And I remember getting there and walking into the book room, and there must have been 145 copies of Freakin' the Mighty, which is a great book. I get it. It's a great book, but 145 copies just sitting there unopened, brand new. And you can just see he just spent all this money. And when CSUSA looked at our budget and everything like that, I mean, they cinched it. It was tight. So now, excuse me. So even now, I mean, it's like the budget, we're under such a microscope. And talking about fundraising, it's almost like a curse word. You can't say fundraising. Right. It's so our money is so tight. It's a wonder how we can even function as a school. Sometimes it really blows my.
Yeah, I mean, once you get yourself in, once you get yourself in that kind of trouble, or somebody else does, and it's your responsibility to get you out, that then the rules tighten up on you so tight that you can't do anything for a while. I mean, when I went to the high school, we still owed for the yearbook, didn't have any money. We owed Pepsi, we owed the Sheraton where they'd had the prom, we owed Jostens for yearbooks. Um, you know, but they allowed all those people to retire and just melt away. And yes, that's the kind of stuff that you get into. And it makes it really, really tough. And it makes it hard on you as a leader to get people behind you when they come to you and need $15 for something. You have to tell them no. We just can't do that. And it's really, really hard. And I know you can't buy followers, but when you can't do something like $15 for somebody, for a kid, it seriously impacts your ability to lead. It really does. It's not just about the item itself. It's that, what good are you for us? I mean, you don't have any compassion. You can't help. It's like kind of like we're doing all this and you're doing nothing. And so it seriously hurts you as a leader when you get yourself in that kind of bind financially. So let's look at full screen. Let me share my screen. Let's look at our activities for the week that we need to be looking at. All right, so interview an administrator about fundraising. The takeaway on that again is you're responsible for it. I don't care if you delegate it to the PTA, the PTO, the booster club, you still have to be responsible for it. Now, every district, now there are state guidelines, North and South Carolina, and they're pretty much the same about how you deal with money, but there's also going to be extra policies from your district. Remember, federal law, state law, but local board policy. There's going to be state law on how you handle the money, and there's even going to be further board policies on how you operate with fundraising. The biggie is to understand that you're, as the principal, are responsible for it. Even if you don't do it, even if the band does it, sells fruit, doesn't matter. You're responsible. Has to be approved beforehand, and it has to be reflected in your budget. So let's look at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg, some of the policies on fundraising for them. And so if we go to the back of this now, as it says right here, you will have similar policies in your LEA or your charter school. And it says here's how we will do fundraising in our district. You will follow the accounting procedures of the school system. That's modified accrual accounting system. That means that you will purchase order all items and get it approved. You will write checks for them. They will be delivered. You will collect money and you will receipt all monies and you will deposit all monies daily. That's what accounting procedures of the school system means. The same as the school district does on money. And then it goes on to say you have to handle the money according to this by the state finance division, which again, all that means receipt everything, turn the money in daily, the whole deal. Purchase orders to get the supplies. All right. Then it says all activities for middle and high school have to be approved by the principal, and then the principal has to be approved by the area superintendent. Clubs and organizations have to submit first month their anticipated fundraising. They have to tell us what they're going to do with it. They have to submit a written proposal to raise money. And it goes to the regionals. That's now the area superintendent for final approval. Fundraising are recommended club, class, school festivals, carnivals, dances, car wash, barbecues, concerts, films, student faculty games. You notice candy's not on the list. You have to get a special dispensation because of me. Even 25 years later, 30 years later, you still have to get a special dispensation in Charlotte to sell candy because of me. I own it. I sold a freight train load of candy over the years. I fully acknowledge that. You can't use instructional time for fundraising. that's why we had to do away with a lot of when I was at Ellenboro, we did the county fair and teachers worked it and we didn't go inside. It was on our campus for a whole week. You know, North Mech did a barbecue. I did away with the barbecue when I was high school principal at Olympic because teachers, there wasn't enough community volunteers and teachers had to do the barbecue and we couldn't have school. See, I'm gonna stop my share just for a second here. And this is one of those sermon kind of things. What you have to be careful of is trading state dollars for school dollars that you've got, state and local LEA dollars for school dollars that you have control of. What does that mean? Who pays, you know, if you have an English teacher in your building or a third grade teacher in your building, or if you have a CTE, you know, career and technical teacher in your building, who pays their salaries? Well, the CTE teacher is paid by who? Federal, right? And all the regular allotment teachers are paid by the state. All right, somebody else is paying them. All right, what I'm going to do as principal, I'm going to put them to work for me. Instead of doing what they've been paid for, which was to teach students, I'm going to have them out fundraising. And so I'm going to get that money that they fundraise. They're out working for me, except it's a really bad trade. I think, you know, a lot of the research says it's about 50 to 1. For every $1 that you raise in fundraising, it costs you about $50 in salary for those people. Well, you say, but I'm not paying their salary. So it's free money for me. It's free labor, except it's against the law to do that. You can't have teachers that are being paid by somebody else to raise money for you. That's become a biggie. So that's the big thing. Now, full disclosure, we used to have locally paid teachers. When I first started in the business, of course, that was back long before there was such a thing as internet and online banking or any of that. And so you got a check every month. There was no direct deposit or any of that. You got a check. You got a physical check, and it was either pink, yellow, or blue. And it wasn't because we were, you know, woke or any of that. It was because the funding source determined the color of the check you got. Blue check was a state check. Yellow check was a local. Yellow check was a federal check, and the pink check was locally paid. So we used to have locally paid teachers, and so one of the things that people used to not know is when we first started doing a lot of these back in the 50s and 60s and even into the 70s, a lot of these traditional like barbecue fundraisers and those things, and the county fair at Ellenboro that I inherited, you know, at the end of in the 80s, a lot of those things, they used men vocational or they used men locally paid teachers to do those. And that was okay legally. It wasn't a good thing. It wasn't a good idea instructionally, but it was a good idea. It was okay legally. But as we got away from locally paid teachers starting in the 1980s, it was no longer legally. But we had people up until the 90s, maybe even into the new millennium. I won't say we did. I know I stopped it, and North Mech stopped within a year or so of me, but I know I stopped the one at Olympic. I think I stopped it in 97. And so but a lot of those were from back in the day with locally paid teachers. And now that we don't really have locally paid teachers like that anymore, we tend to spend our money locally on facilitators and coaches and folks like that. And it would be totally inappropriate. Of course, it'd be illegal, but we don't have locally paid teachers by and large anymore like we did back in those days. So yes, we used to do it. It wasn't illegal because we were paying the people who were raising our money locally with local money. But now that we don't do that anymore, that is not a legal thing to do. So I've had students argue, well, you know, it was done forever. It was, but the funding was different then than it is now. But that's why it had to go away. You can't be using federal and state money for that. All right. Instruction-related activities such as auto mechanics, tailoring, cosmetology should not be used for fundraising. And I can tell you why that is, because you can run little sweatshops in the back, but I can tell you even more importantly, because I had this one happen. I had a carpentry class when I was high school principal, one of the high schools, and they were building those little buildings like you've seen. Now, they weren't building that one building a year. They were building like those little garages, like Mays Manufacturing, like you put your lawnmower in, except they could build them for half of what Mays Manufacturing charged. And so that was part of that too, is that made them people mad as fire having to compete with free labor over at the high school. And so, yeah, you got to be careful about raising money with any of those things. You know, it makes people in the community mad because they can't compete with it. Also, people get hurt, or they, you know, what happens if they work on your car and they blow it up? I mean, you know, or you know, you have to make your shirt and it has both sleeves on the same side. I mean, what are you going to do? You've got no recourse. And so you can't be in the business. I told you I inherited a fellow that was running a photography business out of the photography lab. What made it worse than that is he was being paid for the state English teacher position to teach photography and run a business. It was a bad one. Oh, it was a real bad one. These are the kinds of things you get into, but you got to know what it is. Pre-numbered tickets for ball games. You have to do a ticket sellers report. You have to do what's known as a reconciliation between the number of tickets and how much money you got. You got to deposit the money that night. It's got to be deposit safekeeping until the next day. Even if you can't reconcile it, you still have to deposit that night and get it the next day and reconcile. Can't be taken home. Can't be taken home. Receipts should be deposited school account on a daily basis. Got to receipt every money and do all that. Use of funds raised. All funds shall be used to benefit of school program. All funds shall be for projects designated prior to the fundraising. Has to be budgeted. All employees of the Board of Education are prohibited from soliciting or selling. So I always get into this tutoring for compensation. Employees are further prohibited from soliciting customer clients engaging in private businesses. All these things you have to be responsible for. I want to spend just a minute on this. What happens if your kid at your school is doing a fundraiser and you take the magazine or the brochure and put it in the teacher's lounge at the place where you work? Is that legal?
No.
That is correct. It is not legal. That's an easy one, isn't it? All right. And what about if you're selling real estate on the side? Is it legal for you to put your cards in the lounge? No. Can't do that either. Can't be soliciting business. What about tutoring kids that you don't teach?
You can't do it on campus, and I know you can't solicit kids like from your campus, right? But you could could you have an outside agency?
So the question becomes, and what Jennifer's talking about is, let's say that you and this happened in my household, and it did. And I'm trying to remember the story here. My wife was taught over at the IB school over in Davidson, lab school over there, just across the water right over there. Her teaching partner was a math teacher. My wife was the English language arts, ELA, and her partner was math science. They worked together for 15 years. Sandy, Tina and Sandy, looked a lot alike, roughly the same age. Kind of a dynamic duo. Sandy's husband was a salesman. Did okay in life, but they had 2 children that were heavily involved in athletics, like travel, swim, and you spend a lot of money on those kids, and they needed extra money. There's nothing wrong with that. And so Sandy, being the math teacher, she contracted to Huntington? These tutoring schools. There's plenty of them in the Lake Norman area. I mean, there's of different kinds, but now the problem with that's okay until what happens when one of the kids from your school is there. And so the rule is you could contract, but you can't work with a kid from your own school, even in a private setting like that. You're not to be compensated for one of the kids at your school. And you know, because I could see that in that if that were the case, then you would be recruiting at your own school. But even more sinister, I'm not going to teach you this during the day. If you come over here, I'll teach you how to do this in math. And so you have to be careful with that. But that's all the rules on fundraising and how to deal with fundraising. Fundraising will get you quicker than anything in terms of if you're an honest person. Now, I'm not talking about if you're shady. I'm talking about even if you're an honest person, fundraising, it will still get you quicker than anything else on the money, because there's so many moving pieces. There's so many shysters in that realm, and so much of that kind of stuff. And as I said, and I belabored the point to start with, there's people like Bocock Stroud who know that it's not the right thing to do to take and write up a bill for several $1,000s on call or without a purchase order, but they'll do it anyway in fundraising. I mean, most of the people involved in fundraising are not on the front row of the Baptist church next Sunday. Let's just put it that way. They're on the back row in hell, most of them. So you got to keep your eye on the fundraising. It gets away the fastest of anything. Now, and the reason why it gets away faster than anything is you've got a bookkeeper that's keeping an eye on every penny on all of your different school accounts, but you don't have that for fundraising. And you've got parents and other people involved in that. I'm not saying that every parent's going to be like that family at South Macon absconded with $500,000. But it happens every week. You know, understand that, even though I'm old, I was old and I can't hold my phone. I've been on the cutting edge of technology since the early 80s. And so I say that to say this. Technology is a wonderful thing, and if you use it correctly, you can collect incredible data if you know the sources to get it. And I can just tell you right now that I have my phone tuned to certain news feeds, not that are not politically based, but are database news feeds, so I can keep up with all this stuff. And it's not, and a week goes by that I don't get a notification of the story from some local paper around the country where all the money's gone over to PTA again, or the Booster Club, or it is a constant. There's not a day goes by. If you can avoid it, you need to not get into the fundraising business. Jennifer, you've got a question.
Well, I wanted to go back, if you don't mind, to the tutoring thing again. I know teachers who tutor over the summer, like parents will say, well, I want you to teach my child, like over the summer. They wouldn't necessarily be their student anymore. Is that also legal? Because it would be kids from their school.
Let me be clear here. If it was Charlotte Mecklenburg, it would be.
Okay.
Now, remember, we're talking about, this is a local board policy that will vary from district to district. Some of them are very lenient. Some of them are a lot more strict.
Okay.
Charlotte Meck was kind of in the middle for years, but then as I was talking about, within the last few years, they've gone completely the other way. You can't be involved with kids here in the district, period. I don't care if you do it through Huntington or Sylvan. We can't do that. There was just too many problems it kind of got triggered by social media. Some of these teachers put out some really ugly things about kids on social media, and they said they had the right to do that because they were tutoring them over here, that they weren't really their students, or it wasn't in school. But that's how it all got started, with some social media going back and forth. And they had to let they fired those teachers. And then it was some other things, some inappropriate behaviors. I know one of the stories, and I don't want to get too deep in it, where it was almost like, and this sounds crazy, I'll truly acknowledge it before we start. It was almost like a prostitution ring. You say, Dale, what the hell are you talking about? We're talking about 200 kids. Daddies of middle school kids offering ridiculous sums of money to tutor their child, with expectations of more than tutoring. We had a problem with that one. And now this is not hearsay, folks. I had to deal with this one. This is not hearsay. Now, full disclosure, the daddy involved drove a Mercedes S550. If you know anything about Mercedes, that costs as much as most of us' house. But he would throw $100 bills around here and there. His son needed tutoring and this kind of stuff. Yeah. And I think that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. There's just too much. There's just too much. There's just too many problems there. Yeah, that fella, he expected more for his money than just to help his son with math. But now he wasn't the only one. But so you would have to look at your district's policy on that. And it would be one of those things that I would read it, but that I would also go to the general counsel or the associate general counsel in your district and say, interpret this for me, and ask the same question that you have. Is this something that you would take, what's the call here? Because in the end, it's your district who's going to take the action against you for doing this. And so you would need to know up front, I know what it says here, but interpret this. Is this something that's going to cost me my job? If I get involved with this, what is the absolute here? If we go through a third party vendor, is it okay or no? Well, it's now a no in Charlotte. You can't, any kid in your school, you can't in any way do any tutoring for any kid that's in your building. Even if it's the summertime, even if it's through Phillips Sullivan or Huntington, you just can't. It's just the liability is too great. That the abuses are too much. And so you got to get your thumb on fundraising. If you can't, you just won't survive. I'm just telling you, just won't survive. I mean, you'll think that this is nothing, and you'll be arguing that this was a tempest in a teacup, much ado about nothing, and you'll be arguing that passionately in the unemployment line. I mean, it's just one of those things. It's just such an it's a cliche in our business, but it's just there's a reason why it's cliche in our business, because we don't give you any leeway. It's just, and there's no amelioration. I only know one person, and that survived a swindle like this. She got demoted, but she survived it. And the only reason she survived it is that she was in the hospital when it happened. Now that's how much compassion that the district, you say, wait a minute, what? She ran to the beach for, one last weekend before school started in August, went running right on the beach, wave hit her, knocked her over and broke both her legs. She was in the hospital for weeks, the whole fall. While she was out, they stole all the money. When she came back, they had her under charge, and she got demoted for the second half of the year from principal. She'd been principal about 8 years to AP. And they said, we're doing you a favor. We're not firing you. And she was like, but I wasn't even at work. I was in the hospital. It's your responsibility to keep up with the money. Can't make that up, folks. So that's the best that can happen. Dr. Sane, you want to close us out on that one? We'll talk about a couple other things.
I just want to reiterate your point. Don't fundraise. Don't fundraise unless you have to.
Yeah, don't fundraise unless you have to.
And if especially if you're a Title I school, fundraising and for specifically in Lincoln County, our school board is getting involved in fundraising because our county commission passed the 25-cent tax to support schools. And then they just came back and blasted all of us at the district office saying, we're giving you this money and you're still fundraising for the things that the money is buying. And another thing is if you advertise what you advertise your fundraising for, make sure that's what you use the money for.
Yeah. Yeah, it needs to be a compelling argument what you need it for now. You can't just say we're going to raise money because we want extra supply. You got to have a compelling argument, especially if your county commissioners are. Remember, school boards are unempowered. It's county commissioners that are giving you money. And when they're out raising taxes and giving you extra appropriations, and they're going, they're spending political capital on you as well as capital, it's seen as you're seen as being ungrateful, and you're throwing them under the bus to fundraise. It's exactly right. So that's another reason not to. The other thing that
just like the hardest conversation I've ever had as a principal was telling a teacher that she could not sell her nails, her Taylor Street nails, in the teacher lounge.
Yeah, she couldn't sell fingernails in the lounge. Yeah.
And people will do it, and they do it all the time. You go to your teacher lounge right now, I guarantee you there's somebody soliciting business or selling something. Just that can't happen. And we kind of turn a blind eye until it's too late.
Yeah. No, the teacher selling the fingernails won't get in trouble. It'll be you. You can't do that. Tanya raised her hand.
Yes, I just want clarification, Dr. Sane. And you were saying if you're a Title I school, it's kind of shunned upon, you having fundraisers. So what if, like, for example, I'm in charge of the Beta Club at my school, and we normally have a fall fundraiser. How does that work? How does that look? And we're a Title I school, so how does that look for our school?
So I was referring to actual school fundraisers. So fundraisers by the school, because for example, if you had a Title I school that gets $80,000 and you're 1-to-1 where nobody else is, and you have a fundraiser for technology, that just doesn't look good. But the clubs, that your district probably has policies about how many your clubs can have, one per year. But for Lincoln County, it's 2 fundraisers per school. So that's where I would. No, the clubs, because that's fundraising for a specific purpose that you don't get funds for. Your Title I funds not helping out your main club. So that's
yeah. So, for example, here in the town that I live in, Cornelius Elementary is not a Title I school, and so they do a school-wide fundraiser. And they simply send a note home to parents and say, send us a check. And they do. That's their fundraiser. They don't sell anything. They don't order anything. They don't have, fruit or wrapping paper or candy or any of that. They just send a note home that says, send us a check. We'll take Venmo. We'll take checks. You can, here's a link you can go to and upload you can do debit or credit, you can do Venmo, you can do Apple Pay or whatever if they have it fixed. And so, their annual fundraiser is to send out the notice, set up the links, and just send us the money. Now, you can do that at Cornelius. And they raise, they suggest if you're a parent at Cornelius that you Venmo them $500 at the beginning of the year. And everybody does. And so they get $500,000 at the beginning of the year. Now they have a big time all year long. And of course, you don't have to pay for anything after that. If you get on a bus and go somewhere, or if you have this or the daddy daughter dance, you just pay your $500 up front. And after that, you get all you want of everything. But now think if you were Title I school getting all that federal money, how bad that'd look if you were out doing that. So again, it's clubs. You can do some club fundraising, but you need to get out of the school fundraising is what we're talking about. You need to get out of that piece of it. It looks bad. It embarrasses and insults the county commissioners. Everybody understands you got a little club that wants to do this or that. That's okay. That's cute. They're raising, $400, and it's entrepreneurship, and they're learning the value of the dollar. Everybody likes that. But when you asking somebody for $500,000, that kind of makes them mad and they just get you an appropriation. That's what I'm talking. That's what we're talking about. That's that, you know, you got to read the room kind of thing. Yeah, and so that's what I get. You as a school need to get out of fundraising as an enterprise. You can let little clubs do little things, and you got to keep up with them because there's value in that for kids. If kids are doing the work, they're learning some valuable lessons, and the things that they get out of it, you know, the little trips or the stuff that they get to do, that's all part of, you know, that could be argued that's learning. But the notion of doing these big school-wide fundraisers like we used to do and doing more than one of them or 4 or 5 of them a year, you got that, those have got to go. They take up instructional time. There's too many the money is too easy to get scattered and spent. There's just too many bad things that can happen on that. That's what we're talking about. Thank you, Tanya, for bringing that up. We wanted to make that distinction. So let's share our screen and look at some of our, I want to make sure that we've covered this. List of 5 most important steps. Now, those 5 are never going to be the same for your principals. But what's important, and I always write this, is that you have 5. That you have a plan on how you're going to set your budget up. And that you're going to involve your school improvement team, that you're going to support your academic initiative from your school improvement plan, that your budget and your master schedule are going to support whatever academic initiatives that you have in your school improvement plan, but that you have a system, that you have steps in budgeting, and you don't just go eeny, meeny, miny, mo. That you don't have a system of priorities. I think Dr. Sane mentioned back earlier this semester that it's, you know, we were talking about this with the doctoral group, and Dr. Laws mentioned the other night, it's also good to have some cover. Well, what does that mean? Well, you've got all these different groups coming to you as principal want part of your budget. How do you make a decision? Well, you let the school improvement team make the decision based on what their priorities are. Take some of that heat off of you. And because and I said that to say this, I don't really care about heat, but most people do, or I'm kind of abnormal. But one of the things that principals have done forever, which is really, really bad practice, really bad practice, is take how much money that they have and take the request and just divide it up equally among everybody, so that nobody gets their needs met and that money is just wasted. Budgeting means is that we have priorities. And if I've got $50,000 in my budget, I don't give all 10 groups 5,000 where they can't do anything. Budgeting means I'm going to give one group 30 of that because we can make an impact. We can move scores. But you know, if you're one of those people who can't stand the heat, or it bothers you when people yell and scream and throw stuff at you, won't fight. If you're a little slight or not too big, then it also helps that you've got a group that are making these decisions based on your most pressing need. Remember when you did your most pressing need for your app sale, your first evidence, you put a group of people together and you looked at your data, and collaboratively you figured out what our most pressing need was. I mean, we have you do that because those are the kinds of decisions that you need for your school improvement team to be making, looking at your data, looking at what your school is doing academically, and determining we're going to put the money here. We need to support reading. We need to support math. That's what we're talking about here, is the very notion that if you're one of those folks that needs that support, this is the perfect way to do that. But a budget, you got to have a priority list. You've got to have that most critical need. How am I going to determine that? You've got to have an idea of how you go. You can't just, you know, kind of drift through the wind like a feather. You've got to have a plan. Again, I'm not ever been out of shape about what the plan is, other than I think it ought to go back to your academics, but you just got to have it. And then the last is when you look at your budget, You got to keep your eye on your federal monies. And remember, we've talked about all the different federal programs that you can have in your building. They've all got separate budget. It doesn't come lumped under just federal. I think Dr. Singh talked to you about that earlier. That Lord have mercy, you got so many line items in the budget now. Well, you say, well, how do you have that? You just have federal, state, local, and school monies. Well, federal. How many different federal programs have you got? We talked about that. You've got CTE that has several different curricular tracks in it. You've got Title I, you've got EC, you've got 504, you've got ESL, you've got gifted, and you've got multiple in those, and then you've got different pots of money that comes from the feds. Each of those is a different line in your budget. Then, Lord, when you get to the state budget, there must be 25 or 30 different lines in the state budget of different columns that you can buy this with, but not that. You got all of those, and then you got your local money from your county, and then you got your school money. And under school money, you can have a lot of accounts under school money, especially if you're secondary, just like Tanya was talking about her beta club. So they'll have their own line item in the budget. All the clubs will have their own, all of your organizations, all the athletics, all boosters, all those people will have a line. And you've got to watch each one of those lines to make sure that they're not encumbering or spending money that they don't already have, that the money has dropped, it's there. And that they use the modified, you know, that they use the purchase order system. To, you know, all of those things have to happen. You got to keep an eye on that money. And so for that reason, if you haven't seen this document, I'll point you there. We're getting to the end here. I have this document under tonight, and it has all the budgeting laws. The powers and duties of the principal. Principal shall maintain a copy of the school's current budget. You're the one that has to have that. Has to be in the front office, and when anybody comes by and asks for it, you have to show them. It is not true that when your principal says, well, that's confidential. It is not. There's nothing confidential about the budget. And shall allow parents of children in the school and any other interested persons to review and obtain such documents. That is the law. Again, we can't hide this from the public. It is not true that we don't publish the budget. It is not true that it's I don't care what you ask me. None of it is true. The only thing that's true is you must keep a record of every penny that comes through your school, state, federal, local, or school money. You must account for every penny of it. And anybody that comes walking into your building and asks to see it, you have to show it to them, period. None of it can be a secret. None of it is confidential, period. There is no, but what about, there is no what about this. You see the law right here. It's as clear as it can be. If the newspaper comes in and demands to see your budget, then you have to give the newspaper your budget. That's just the way it goes. If you don't want shady stuff to be seen, then don't do shady stuff. It's not hard. Not hard. Please remember, as we've talked about before, that state works on the modified accrual accounting system, which means when state money comes from per pupil, it comes in 10 monthly installments rather than in lump sum. So the $8,000 that comes every year for kids, and somebody said, but the average pupil funding in North Carolina is $11,288. It is, but your schools don't get all of that. It takes a lot of money to run state government and all the different things that go on. Schools get about $8,000. They don't get $8,000 at one time. They get 810 installments minus absenteeism. Remember, you don't get paid for the kids on the roll. You only get paid for the ones that come to school every day. So monthly installments, and it's a modified accrual accounting system, which means you have to start the year with your budget and pay from local money on hand. Should have at least 3 months on hand. You pay, and then you voucher the state, and they reimburse you the money that you spent, and that's the way it works every month. You get those 10 installments. That's how that works. You have an accounting system in your district. When you become principal of a school, the first thing you should ask is for a local audit. You have people so you'll know where the money is. You get audited every spring, but you should ask for an audit when you take one over, so there'll be no surprises, and you'll know where you are. You get audited every year. Shall produce all books and records requested by the auditor. And you can't conceal, falsify, or refuse to deliver or divulge any books, records, or information. You got a treasurer, you got special funds that talks about those, your different accounts in your building. And then it talks about, then I've got fundraising. So it's pretty straightforward. Here's all the budget laws you need to know. But in the end, don't get your money or your honey where you work. It will not go well for you. As a general practice, don't fundraise as a school. Allow small groups to do it, and make sure it stays small, and make sure they know what they're doing it for. But even that has to be budgeted. And another reason why I say keep it small and doing that is please remember that your bookkeeper is going to have to help you, and you're going to have to keep up with this stuff. You're not going to be able to hire additional staff to keep up with all these different fundraisers that you've got going all the time. And you can't be using teachers. You can't be pulling teachers anymore out to do that. See, that's what we used to do. We used to set teachers up, and if you'll remember, and during homeroom, it might be all the first period, but they would be taking money from the fundraiser coming in. Can't do that anymore. You just don't have the physical resources and the personnel to run school-wide fundraisers anymore. So if you got a little group that can do it on their own, like Tanya's Beta Club group, yeah, do that. But in the end, these booster clubs, not to insult Willie, but coaches don't have time to follow them. Coaches coach. That they don't have time. And many of them, and the insulting part is, many of them don't have the training to know if the boosters club is who doing them on the money or not. They just don't know. And so don't depend on that. You need to know what's going on. Anybody have any other questions on our on finances tonight? Tried to give you a practical overview of how the money works. Okay, let me go back to the other thing, and then we'll be done tonight. Okay, next week we're going to talk about. Looks like we're going to do financial management, resource allocation, managing resources, academic issues. We're going. It's kind of a catch-all, but we're going to talk about. We're going to let Dr. Singh talk a little more about personnel next week as well, about hiring and the hiring process and supervising people from an administrative perspective. We're going to talk a little more about that next week. Then the week after, we'll have our last case study, and then we'll follow up. We'll do sexual harassment, and we'll talk about some of the things going on Monday the 5th. So I think we're in good shape. Make sure you get all your points in. Go in Blackboard. I believe it's over near the top of your menu. It says My Grades, and everything listed you should have a grade for. If you don't, make sure you upload all your work. We got a lot of good work. Jennifer, have you finished both your evidences this semester?
Yes, sir.
See there?
Thank you.
I know that answer. I know we've got Sonia, I think, is finished. Jennifer is finished. See, I believe if you remember, about the second week, they were the first ones to get their task in, and I called them out. See, how you start's how you finish, folks. That's the way it works in this business. If you get off to a slow start, you don't ever get caught up. If you get off to a fast start,
thank you, Dean.
Look at you already. Not even Thanksgiving, already done.
Thank you so much.
It is a reminder for us all in our business as school administrators that we can't be the pigtail. We can't be behind. There's never a time to get caught up. If you start out behind, you'll stay behind. And it's a good reminder for all of us for everyday life in terms of the school business that you can't afford to get behind. There's going to be enough things that get you behind already, your health and things going on in family and all that. But you know, if you can get off to a strong start, you know, how you start's how you finish. And we've talked about that. And so when we do our interviewing session that we're going to do next Thursday, when we do that interviewing on the 23rd at 6 o'clock, when we talk about that, that's one of the things that I'm going to talk about is during that interviewing is you know, the first faculty meeting after you get that new job, and you will, that you got to hit the ground running. If you can get out ahead and get started and get a quick start, get a quick win, know people's names early, that I'm telling you, life will go so much better for you. It's that first month, that first faculty meeting, that first job that in many ways will determine your success for the rest of your career. How you start's how you finish. I appreciate you being with me tonight. Dr. Sane, thank you as always. We'll see you all next week at 7. Thank you again. Work on those evidences. Get that work done.
Thank you.
Thank you.